In this video, we'll demonstrate the use of conditional formatting. So what do we mean by conditional formatting? Obviously, formatting is changing the look of a cell. So in other words, if I wanted to highlight the cells that have sales below 15,000, I can grab a particular cell and maybe turn it yellow or the font red. But I'm manually formatting that cell to look a certain way. With conditional formatting, we're going to set up rules and then let the system format the cells when any cell meets or violates our rule. So right now I'm going to undo Control-Z, Control-Z. On the home ribbon, here's your conditional formatting. And our first example, we're going to use highlight cell rules. In a second, we'll talk about top and bottom rules and then data bars and icon sets. So conditional formatting. Highlight cell rules. Basically, these are all of the different selections we have. In this case, I want to highlight the cells that are below 15,000, so I'll select this. But before I do, I have to select the data that I want to be conditionally formatted. So in this case, I'll grab this entire range. If you wanted, you could just grab a single column, a single row. So it's whatever range that we're going to apply the conditional format. So now that I've selected the range, highlight cell rules. In this case, I'm going to say less than. So if it is less than right here, what is the number that it must be less than? So it somehow randomly chose 24,500. I'm assuming it's reading it off of something. But in this case, I'm going to go, no, I want this cell. So I'm selecting cell B14. Now, how do we want it formatted? So there's some predefined formats that I typically stick with. So light red, yellow, green, light red fill, red text, red border. If you want to do your own kind of formatting, you can go to custom format. And now you can play with, maybe you're going to change the number format, the font. You can put a border around cells. You can fill it. You can choose anything you want. Again, for sake of time, I typically go with the predefined formats, and I'll even stick with this one, light red fill with dark red text, and I hit OK. So those cells are red because they're less than 15,000. If somebody comes through and decides this was a mistake, this should actually be 20,000, I can type that, and when I hit enter, the red goes away because that cell no longer meets the condition, so it's not red anymore. So it's fairly easy to use. You just have to spend some time to look at some of the other rules. Greater, less, between, equal to. And if you're dealing with text, you have things that the text contains. Maybe I'm dealing with a column full of dates, and I want a date that's occurring yesterday, today, tomorrow, last week, whatever. And then I can format it when it meets those rules. What else do you have? And then duplicate values. So I have a whole column full of data, and I want to highlight those that are duplicates. So I can select that range and then choose duplicate values, and then each duplicate value would get highlighted. Okay, let's talk about top and bottom rules. Same data set. I'm going to hit Control and scroll in with my mouse to make it a little larger. But what I want to know is show me the top 10%, or maybe let's make it 15% of our sales units across these brands. So I'll go to Conditional Formatting. Now here's your top and bottom rules. You have top 10 items or 10%, right? That's two different things. The 10% is going to depend on how many items you have. So let's just say I want to do the top 10%. One thing to notice is that you can change this value to 15 or whatever you want it to be. And as before, you can change your formatting to be whatever. So this time, maybe because it's our top 15%, we'll fill with dark green text and hit OK. And I obviously can do the same thing with the bottom rules. And again, sometimes students will get flummoxed when on an exam I'll say choose the bottom 15 items or the bottom 15%, because when you read the description it says 10 items. But recognize when you select it, you can always change that value to be whatever you need it to be. So these are the bottom 15 values out of that current data set. And again, you can change the format. So hit OK on that. And one more example under that same region. I'm going to clear these rules. So I go to Conditional Formatting, and here's how you clear them. You can clear from your selected cells, which is what I'm going to do, or from the entire sheet. So we'll just clear from the selected cell. One other way you can conditionally format using these top and bottom rules is just highlight all those values that are above average or below average, and Excel will do the work of calculating the average of your selected data. So if I say above average, it's going to grab those values that are above the average that it calculated, and then I'll change it to a green fill and hit OK. So those are above average records or values given that data set. Finally, the last thing you can play with are data bars and or icon sets, and then there's actually a third one called color scales. So again, let me hit the control key and scroll with my mouse to make this a little bit larger. So here's what data bars will do for you, and I'm just going to grab a single column of values this time. It might make it a little easier to understand. But basically you select data bars, and all you're choosing is, do you want a gradient fill or a solid fill, and then what particular color. But as you can see, what they do, the length of the bar in the cell represents the size of the values as compared to the other values in that cell. So I'll choose a gradient blue, and then you can see that the 40,000 value is the largest in this set, and so it has the longest bar. Then 33 is the next. 11 is shorter than 16. So that's what data bars are doing. On one of your assignments, they do actually have you do some adjustments to that. So for instance, here under Manage Rules, you can see that I've got this rule called Data Bar, and you can edit that rule. And one of the things that you can change is the minimum and maximum values. And so I don't do this regularly, but for instance, notice that because this is the largest value, the data bar fills the entire cell. All right. If for whatever reason you didn't want that, I could change the maximum value here to a number, and then I could put in the number of 50,000, and when I hit OK, it shortened that bar just a little bit, and of course it shortened the others proportionally. I'll clear these rules, and let's do it across all of the data set. So I'll hit clear rules from selected cell. I could do data bars across that whole range if I wanted to. So if I wanted to do a solid fill, this time I'll just randomly choose green. And so basically the length of the bar represents its size in relation to all of the selected data where I put the rule. Again, I'll clear rules. I'll show you the color scales, which is kind of interesting. To have it make sense, I will just select a single column again. Now what this is going to do is highlight the cells. In fact, that's description, if I can get it to show up, is pretty good. It's going to apply a color gradient to a range of cells, and the color indicates each cell value falls within that range. And so basically the one I've currently have my mouse on is red, yellow, green. And so the largest value will be red, the smallest value will be green, and the shade of green or the shade of red kind of determines where the other values fall within that gradient. So this is our largest. It's a dark red, not quite as red. This is a light green, a much darker green, and then this yellow guy is kind of in the middle. Okay, well, how does Excel decide what the color should be for which values? As I mentioned, we edited the properties of our data bars. We can also edit the properties of these color scales. So if I run in and go Manage Rules, there it is. I hit Edit Rule. And right now we have a 3-color scale, so red, yellow, green, and the lowest value is green. At the midpoint is where it decides to start putting in yellow values, and at the highest value it's red. Now you can change these to be percentages, you can make it a specific number, you can use a formula. Obviously with this drop down you can change the colors. It doesn't have to be red, yellow, green if there's something in particular, or colors of your company that you want to use. So you can format those to a pretty high level. And for an example, maybe my highest value, rather than that being red, I would prefer that the highest value be green. So I could run over here and choose that color green, and my minimum value, it would make more sense if it was kind of a red color. So I'll go ahead and just choose that red right there. So now when I hit OK and apply those changes, my low values became kind of a deep red, and my higher values are green. And finally, last thing are the icon sets, which are very similar. So this will only just take a second. I'll clear the rules of my selected cells. But the same idea, rather than color scales, you can have icon sets. So you can have arrows of different kinds, shapes, indicators, ratings, and there's more. Right now, maybe I'll just choose indicators right here. And the same idea, but what indicators do you want to show for what values? That is something that you can customize. So same thing, I'll go into Manage Rules, edit the rule, and you have all of these different icon styles. And right here, it looks a little different than the color scales, but when the value is greater than or equal to 67%, right? So you can change that to a number. You can say less than or equal to, or well, this one has to be greater than. When it's less than 67 but greater than 33%, and when it's less than 33. So obviously each one of these values, whether you're dealing with percents or an actual value, you can change. You can also change your icon set to be whatever you want it to be. So just you have to play around with some of this customization to reflect what you want. The last thing I want to mention, I have a tab called Manage Rules, and it was just to remind me to cover that. As you've seen several times, I go into Manage Rules to edit the rule so that it looks how I want it to look. But the other thing I want to mention, let me hit Clear Rules here, is as students are learning conditional formatting, they'll put like 10 formats on here because they keep messing up just a little bit. So the first time they'll just select a single cell, they'll run up to conditional formatting, they'll say when it's greater than 40,000, they'll hit OK. Okay, but then they're like, oops, I meant to grab all of the cells, so then they'll come up here and create another rule, right? And then if it's, well, maybe it's supposed to be less than or equal to 25,000, they'll hit OK. And then they decide, oops, I was supposed to do a different color, so they'll run up here, highlight cell rules, less than 25,000, and then they'll make it yellow, hit OK. And so when they're done, they've got several rules against these same cells, but you don't recognize it. And so I always encourage people to go into conditional formatting and look at all of the various rules. And if you recognize that some of them are a mistake, well, then you can delete the rule. So I'll select this one and go, oh, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this one, and let's just keep the one that I finally did correctly. So run into Manage Rules when you're done, and make sure you don't have some rules that are not intended. So that's it. Conditional formatting, easy to use. I use it a lot. It's a powerful way to bring people's attention to the values that you want them to look at.